So, hello, welcome to the Evolution Exchange, a monthly conversation series from the Society for the Study of Evolution. I'm Regina Baucom, your SSE president. Each month, I'm going to be speaking with guests whose insights can help us navigate our scientific and professional lives. These conversations are meant to engage our membership in a novel way, address current issues, and reflect on where our community is headed. So, thanks for joining us. Today, I'm delighted to speak with Dr. Sam Scheiner, a recently retired NSF program officer and a longtime advocate for the evolutionary biology community. Sam, thank you for joining us. So
My pleasure.
awesome. So before I get started, we are going to talk a lot about NSF funding, how to get an NSF grant, how to put your best foot forward. Before I go there, I do want to mention that the Society for the Study of Evolution is an international community. So the conversation that we're having is going to be extremely relevant to scientists in the US who are applying for NSF funds, but it is also relevant to international folks. We do a lot of collaboration cross country, and I think if I know where the conversation's going today, a lot of what you're going to hear is going to be relevant for any type of funding.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So, Sam, first, give us some background. Tell us who you are, what your background is as a scientist, how you became a recently retired NSF program officer, and when you were there, what your general duties were. So, how did you assist evolution faculty and students?
Okay. So I started out as a plant evolutionary ecologist. That's what I did my PhD work on. And my the evolution part of my research has mostly focused on the evolution of phenotypic plasticity empirically. So for the first uh, 13, 14 years of my career, I, did the normal academic thing. As a postdoc, temporary faculty at University of Arizona, went to Northern Illinois University where I got tenure, moved to Arizona State University for a few years, and then for various reasons, and landed at NSF. So I was 13 years in academia, and then 26 years at NSF. So 2/3 of my career has been a program officer at the U.S. National Science Foundation. So there, my primary duty, my primary appointment, so to speak, was with the program, which at the time was called Population Biology. We went through a couple of name changes. The current name is Evolutionary Processes. And so we were the program at NSF that was one of the primary places that like SSE members would be applying for funding, mostly evolutionary processes at both the population up to the macro scale. In addition, I wasn't over those 26 years. I was involved in a number of other programs. Some had evolution in the title. So, for example, I was also helped lead the ecology and evolution of infectious disease program, although that was mostly an ecological focus. Obviously, there was, I would say, evolutionary ecology as part of that. But then there were other programs, like a more recent one called the Biology Integration Institutes, which was about really integrating across biological disciplines. And I was the representative from the Division of Environmental Biology, where evolutionary processes sits. And so it dealt with a lot of proposals that had a strong evolutionary component, but also other kinds of activities. I was the managing program officer for the Math Bio Institute at the University of Tennessee, which again funded a lot of evolutionary work as part of it. So, there was the main focus, but then I was also involved in a lot of other things that had a biological component and often evolutionary component. And so my job was to advise people on, how to submit proposals, then run the review process, make funding recommendations, and then help manage the awards once people got funded.
That's great. Yeah, you've also been a really active member in SSE. So I know that you've pitched in a lot for the undergraduate community program, bringing undergraduate researchers to the yearly meetings. Can you tell us just a bit about that?
Yes, so I was a member of the Education Committee, which is actually a joint committee that has representatives from the three societies that are part of the annual evolution meeting. And as the name implies, it focuses mostly at sort of the undergraduate education level, but also we deal with outreach to the general public. So, for example, the Stephen Jay Gould Award for Science Communication is managed by that committee. There's an annual a grant that committee gives out for work on evolutionary outreach to the general public, usually focused around Darwin Day in February. And so, yeah, I was on that committee for like 20 years, and that was a lot of fun. Uh, and being at NSF, of course, you're not in academia, so that was sort of one way for me to interact more directly on the academic side of things.
Yeah, that's great. Uh, okay, so I have questions about getting NSF funding, as most researchers do, right? My first question is kind of broader about the US federal budget. So we know that grants are tied to the US federal budget. Can you briefly explain to us how the congressional budget and appropriations affected your ability to fund grants and ultimately the ability of researchers to get funded?
Yeah, so yeah, we could spend an hour just discussing the intricacies of how the federal budget works. The the sort of top line thing is there's never enough money, right? There's
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
more fundable research than there is money. I've continually said there's nothing wrong with the peer review process that tripling the NSF budget when it's solved. Um, and, so overall, federal support for research as a percent of gross domestic gross domet- domestic product, which is sort of a good way to
Mhm.
calibrate that, uh, peaked at just under 2% in
Mhm.
1964. So it's been going
Okay.
down ever since.
Okay.
Now, it's only 0.6% of GDP, or
Oh,
one
wow.
third. So in terms of the relative size of the whole U.S. economy, where the federal government portion of support for research has really declined, and that gets into lots of
Hmm.
questions about
Yeah.
the size of the federal budget itself as a function of GDP. But even within the scope of the federal budget, um, you have to separate various things. And so what I'm going to talk about is what's called the non-defense discretionary budget. So uh, the federal budget has approximately three different size pots to it. One is mandatory spending. This is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all of those kinds of things that are sort of set fixed set by the federal government. Then about one third is the defense uh, uh, budget, and then about one third is discretionary, and that's
Yeah.
everything else, right?
Yeah.
So besides NSF, it's and other parts of science, it's Department of Energy, Department of Justice, Department of Agriculture, Department of Education. So all of that, and of course, NSF is a very tiny slice. Um, it's that non-defense discretionary money, research and development in general has been about 10% of that. And that's
A lot.
held fairly steady for about 50 years. But if you start to dig down into details, and if anyone's interested, I recommend AAAS has a very nice set of graphs. You just Google federal budget and you'll get to their web pages. More and more of that has been captured by NIH.
Good.
So that in constant, that is inflation corrected dollars, NSF's budget has been flat for the past 15 years. And that's correcting for general inflation, not for the actual cost of doing science, which has risen faster than that, because the the largest bulk of almost any grant budget is going to be personnel, and those personnel costs have risen much faster than inflation in general. So that's one of the things that we've seen over my 26 years is the real erosion of our ability even to fund grants, even if while a flat budget means that we've really been funding less and less science every year.
Right. So when you say less and less science every year, do you think that that translates into fewer grants or fewer dollars per grant?
The
Or both?
cost per grant has actually been going up. In evolutionary processes, we've tracked this. We have a data set which actually goes back to 1980. Mark Courtney, who was a longtime program officer in population biology, started this, and the cost per award has been rising steadily. And so the absolute number of awards we've been able to make has been dropping.
Has been going down. Yep, that makes sense. So you're telling us about how the budgets have become tighter. So do tighter budgets influence sort of the type of projects that can get funded?
Well, yes and no. I think more what it does is it just constrains the total number, because as program officers, we want to have a diverse portfolio of types of science. And it will have some effect on when we're finally making decisions, right? We have a fixed pot of money, we have a bunch of proposals, and we have to make decisions among them. There's only so many high cost proposals that we can then fund, unless we want to fund only 2 awards in a given cycle. And so there is that does have some effect on, the size of the budget does affect the decisions. We try not to let budget drive everything, right? So we don't only want to fund inexpensive projects. We want to fund a range. But when we're down to the last 2 that we're going to fund, and we have a certain amount of money, the one that's more expensive then may not get funded.
Right. That's good to know. So, kind of a segue into thinking about federal funding and the current amount of federal funding, what people have been dealing with in the past year when it comes to applying for grants. What can the evolutionary community do to support NSF at this point in time?
Okay, so for the immediate, so first of all, let me say that as everybody is very aware, budgets are in huge flux right now. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, there's always a certain amount of uncertainty, although usually historically, that is, if you go back further than 10 years, NSF's budget was actually very nonpartisan, and we had a fair amount of stability from year to year in terms of what we could expect. Um, uh, right now, of course, things are just, I mean, almost total chaos. Um, what I would say, so in the in the past summer, both the House and the Senate committees that were
Right.
responsible for our budgets did actually pass bills. Um, in the House, they proposed to cut our budget 25%. And but in the Senate, they proposed essentially a flat budget.
Mhm.
And so uh, to the extent that you can contact your senators and your congresspeople, what you want, it's a very simple message right now: support the Senate markup.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
and and so that's the immediate answer. And the other part is just to remind these people that the funding of basic research pays off economically in the long term. You have to have a long-term vision, right? It may not pay off for 10, 20, 30 years, but the example that we like to bring up in the biological sciences is, decades and decades ago, somebody went to Yellowstone National Park,
Mhm.
sampled bacteria in a hot spring, discovered Thermus aquaticus, and eventually the TACA protein became the basis for a
Right.
huge biotech industry. But you couldn't have predicted that at the time, and which is why basic science needs to
Right.
be funded.
Right.
And of course, the audience that's listening to us right now, you all know this, but this is a message that needs to get
Right.
repeated to your Congress people. The other thing I would say, if you want to support NSF right now, they are going through a lot of hard times and anxiety. Just reach out to the people at NSF that you know and let them know that you are thinking about them. I mean, just that can be a great comfort to the folks at NSF right now.
Right. So just letting them know that we really appreciate their work,
Yes,
hanging in there, continuing under stressful conditions. So if
exactly.
what I heard was support the Senate markup, right? Number one,
Hmm.
that's one message. The second message is to support long-term research, right? And there's a figure, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's, every dollar that NSF spends comes back $4 to the US economy. Is that right? Or do I have that wrong?
No, I've heard. Well, I mean, there are various estimates, but I've heard 8 to 10.
Okay. For every dollar, 8 to 10
Yeah,
in the US economy. That's
yeah,
amazing, right?
yeah, and of course, because of the kinds of things that NSF funds, some of those connections are hard to make. So probably different economists are going to come up with different numbers, uh, because we're funding things, two, three, four, five steps away from
Right.
the actual marketing. And so, how, can you
Right.
actually assign this particular product on the market to a
Right.
specific dollar that NSF spent? And the answer is often no, but
Right.
it definitely pays off.
Right. So, individual researchers, contact your senators, contact your representatives in the House. What about professional societies like SSE? How could we support NSF's mission?
So I would say uh, the bes- because you represent an array uh, of researchers, that gives you a certain voice on the Hill when you talk uh, to Congress people as representatives of the societies. Uh,
Mhm.
Probably best is through even larger organizations like AIBS, which
Mhm.
SSC is a member of,
Right.
because again, by it's that collective voice which um, which has the- which says something on the Hill in terms of funding research.
Right. And SSC has a program that I'll mention. I didn't check the date, so I can't remember. I can't remember when the due date is for this, but we do have a competition where we have people, or just a proposal where people can write in and say they would like to uh, join AIBS and go to Congress, receive some training on how to communicate with Congress reps. I think we send 3 to 4 people per year. So if any members of SSC are watching this and you're interested in gaining tools and how to have conversations with your representatives, check on the SSC website and you'll see that that link. There'll be a link there to do that. Okay, so moving on, what is your general advice to researchers? So, from postdocs to assistant professors to full professors for maintaining a research program and obtaining funding, especially if you can right now. Think broadly, kind of the advice you'd be giving for people who are really wanting to get in to a faculty position and/or stay in a faculty position.
So here is where I'm going to give advice, which I think is applicable to anybody, not just at all career stages, but not just people in the U.S., researchers broadly. And I would say um, the best thing you can think about in terms of helping maintain your research career is bet hedging.
Mm.
From uh, you know, in for economics, right? You're always told, like, your retirement portfolio, you should have a mix of different kinds of stocks and bonds and so forth. That's a form of bet hedging. In evolutionary terms, this is an evolutionary argument. Evolutionary bet hedging is when an individual uh, has offspring that have an array of phenotypes, so that given that there is variation in optimal fitness, either through space or time. The idea is that by creating variable offspring, you end up having a higher mean fitness than you would specializing in any one
Yeah.
particular phenotype. And so, in the context of a research career, you can think about this in several different ways. First of all, uh, have more than one research project going
Mhm.
in your lab, that especially ones that are supported in different ways, um, including ones that may need very little money. I mean, obviously,
Mhm.
this is going to be, the specifics are going to be very, dependent upon uh, your particular circumstances and the kind of research that you do. But for example, maybe you have a project which, as long as you can get institutional support for some undergraduates,
Mhm.
uh, there's a project which is just very labor intensive that you can have the students do, but may not cost very much in terms of, let's say, reagents. Uh, I'm going to make a pitch for bringing back quantitative genetics, which is sort of in it. I mean, that was my dissertation. And I would
Mhm.
say like 95% or more of the data that I collected required nothing more than a clipboard, a pen, and a ruler.
Right.
So, there's a lot of kinds of research projects which are labor intensive, but not
Right.
material intensive, that you can do for little money. Um, and but then also, gives you the uh, frankly, I find it more interesting to have more than one research project going at a time. But it also means that if you can't get support for one kind of project at a given time, you can focus more
Yeah.
on another while you're trying to get uh, funding for the other. The other thing, and this is really important, is always to consider multiple funding sources. So, for example, even within NSF, a lot of people, they pick a program that they're going to look to for funding and just always apply just to that program. Well, certainly when it comes to evolution, right? So there's evolutionary biology, which is funded all over the foundation, not only in lots of different programs within the biological sciences, but for example, in math, uh, anthropology, biological anthropology is in the social science directorate. If you do work that involves any kind of, let's say, bioengineering, that would be out the engineering department and so forth. So there's lots of different kinds of programs that you can look at within NSF, but also look at other federal agencies, right? For like NIH, the National Institute of General Medical Sciences, they fund the non-human research. That's in fact where I got my first grant to work on plasticity in Drosophila. And so they fund a lot of things that you may not think of or under NIH, but then certainly NIFA, the National Institutes for Food and Agriculture, and the Department of Agriculture, potentially the EPA, potentially Department of Energy, Department of Defense. They will often fund a lot of sort of basic work in on federal bases that they own. This is more sort of on the ecology side of stuff because they own lots of federal land and they have to manage it. They may be funding work, but they also fund various kinds of research, more biomedical stuff. But you never know. So you want to keep your options open. State funding, again, depending upon what you do, there are state wildlife management agencies that may have funding. I mean, and so sometimes it's a question of you're answering a question they want to have answered. Let's say they're concerned about uh, uh, particular species, the maintenance of particular rare species, but at the same time, you could be gathering data that's answering an evolutionary question about those same species. But also think about private foundations and other non-governmental organizations. So the Nature Conservancy, for example, they have a whole research program. And then there are places like the Paul Allen Foundation, which is funds a lot of biological work. This is where people should probably talk to the development or sponsored projects office at their institution, because they will often have contacts or at least know about those kinds of other funding sources, and they could possibly help you. And then another part of debt hedging is collaboration. So, well, biology, especially evolutionary biology, has become more and more collaborative over, certainly over my career. Very few, I don't know if anybody's done a recent tally, for example, of the journal Evolution to see how many single author papers are published anymore, or not just, professors and their students, but a lot of projects of multiple people. By creating collaborative networks, of course, then other people may have other sources of funding that they can tap into, or you just, can join forces, and especially collaborations across national boundaries. Again, SSE is an international society. Those foreign collaborations, again, your foreign collaborators may be able to tap into funds that can help support you the same way that, even at NSF, we would have proposals that we would fund that would involve foreign non-U.S. collaborators that would provide some kinds of funds. And that's a whole long discussion about the details of that. But the point is that, all of these ways of just, not having a narrow research program is a way to just have a fruitful career.
Yeah.
And I can say that certainly worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah, this is great. I mean, you're speaking to a really friendly audience when you talk about bet hedging, right? So when I started grad school, I wanted to work on seed dormancy and bet hedging. It's
Mm.
just a general
Mhm.
yeah, strategy. So I really like that analogy. And also the discussion of quantitative genetics and just evolutionary ecology. You, like you said, clipboard, paper, pencil, something, some calipers. And a good idea, and you can produce some nice work. So but some things that came to mind as you were speaking was, that made me think it might be smart for faculty to think about developing stronger undergraduate research programs. Like,
Mhm.
I know, I think it's Queen's University has a 2-year sort of program where they bring students in and they get course credit for doing a senior thesis, and they develop pretty, serious pieces of work. So that could be something interesting, and applying to a whole bunch of different programs, funding agencies, foundations. Foundations, I really like the advice that you gave there in terms of talking to your development office, because it does seem that your specific development office might have state level funding opportunities that other, you know, universities or other people wouldn't necessarily have opportunities for applying to. So that's a lot of great suggestion, advice right there. Um, the other thing that comes to mind is when you're thinking about asking research questions, very, very cheaply. What popped in mind was thinking about museums, right? So we have a lot of high quality museums across the United States at different universities. The museum, the number of museums, the amount of samples that they have is often mind boggling to me. And so if we want to think about doing work that's not necessarily in the field, we could also make use of the collections that researchers have made over years, right? And ask various questions about morphological evolution, et cetera, right? So, yeah, these are great suggestions. Okay, so let's see. Moving on, when someone is applying for research funds, what's the single most important advice that you would give someone who's applying for research funding?
So this is one we give over and over and over again when we're doing outreach at NSF. Talk to your program officer or program or equivalent, depending upon what the agency or the funding source is. Um, and talk to them at various stages of your uh, project development. So we very often will get inquiries when people are just starting to think about, okay, here's my idea. Uh, what you know where where can I apply for funding? And we talk to them and say, yes, well, this would fit within evolutionary processes, or well, no, maybe this should be submitted to behavior in one of the other divisions, or you really need, this is the kind of thing that actually might be more appropriate over at USDA. Often, I'd go back and forth with them, help them to try to develop their idea. Um, Now, don't expect the the person to dictate your proposal to you.
Mm.
My job as a program officer was to help facilitate your thinking, not
Mhm.
to tell you what to think. Because first of all, if it's not your idea, you're not going to be invested in it. You're not going to write a good proposal. Um, but now there may be kinds of programs on the more on applied side which have very narrow goals.
Mhm.
That's we want a proposal that accomplishes X. But even there, how you're going to do that is often then up to you. And then the other, probably most important place, point at which to talk to a program officer is when your proposal gets declined,
Mhm.
and when, and decline is the more likely outcome.
Right.
What you get a set, at least from NSF, you get a set of written reviews, a summary from the panel, and the individual reviews. What's down on paper is never the entire story,
Mhm.
because there was a whole discussion among the panelists that went into that panel summary, and then among the program officers afterwards, in terms of our making our recommendation. And so it's good then to talk to us, and we can tell you whether or not, first of all, based on the reviews, do you need to really rethink this from the ground up, or was it actually pretty close and you just need to maybe tweak a few things, or more likely somewhere in the middle. Sometimes the problem is you had a great idea, but you didn't articulate it properly, or
Mhm.
something like that.
Mhm.
So talking to program officers at various different stages can be very useful.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think I'm not sure if it was you that gave me this advice or maybe George Gilchrist. I think it was George, suggested that I write up a short little brief, one paragraph, two paragraph. This is what I'm thinking. Send it to him, have them look over. I'm not sure, yeah, exactly where that advice came from. And so that would be, the initial conversation that I would have with the
Yeah.
PO. And then after that, I never felt super comfortable continually reaching out to the PO. I didn't have, whenever I would have something declined, I would reach out and try to, get a little information on what I should do next. But it kind of sounds like where's the balance? Like, what is too much contact
Yeah.
versus you could contact a little more.
So, yeah, certainly the initial contact, and that advice about writing up a short paragraph helps, because it gives us a sense. And sometimes we'll see that and say, "Oh, well, I'm not the right person for you to be contacting," and and we'll forward it on to the person who is best suited for that idea. Um, and so. I, I would say, if there was sort of a big open question after that discussion of exactly where you were going to go with the project, then it might be appropriate to come back and say, okay, so I've rethought about what you said. I've refined my idea a bit. Does this still make a lot of sense? Once you get into the details, that's the point at which, frankly, for us, it's, well, let's see the whole proposal. Let it go through the review process. See how, first of all, how you're able to really articulate the thing in detail, um, in writing, and how reviewers are going to react to it. And then, and then after the review process has happened, then we can give you a lot
Yeah.
more advice. Um, oh, one thing about contacting us, phone or Zoom is fine. You don't need to come to NSF in person. Although I will say, post pandemic, people, the amount of travel dropped a lot anyway. Before that, people would be like, "Oh, I'm going to spend 3 days traveling to DC,
Oh, wow.
coming to NSF
Mhm.
uh, for like an hour meeting," and it was just a
Mhm.
huge waste of people's times. Often, university sponsored projects office would bring the whole big delegations, and
Oh, wow.
I always thought that was a big waste, because it's much better just to do, I do
Mhm.
an hour on the phone or on Zoom, and we can go through a lot more, save everybody a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, that's great. Um, let's see. I had a question. Oh, I think one piece of advice, I have two follow-up questions. One piece of advice that I'm pretty sure you gave me after a decline proposal was if you see reviewers nitpicking, like picking on specific detail, that means that the overarching question, the broad sort of framework didn't work, right? You need to go back and reframe it. Did that sound like you?
Yeah. Yeah. So this gets to the what's on paper is not always the whole story. And yes, panels are like to be nice.
Understand.
And if they really, um, I mean, they'll be honest, but if it's a proposal which just isn't like exciting enough,
Mhm,
um,
mhm.
they often don't want to just say that, like, oh,
Right.
well, this is boring. And so instead, what they end up doing is, as you said, nitpicking.
Mhm.
And what it really means is the whole thing is boring. And we as program officers, we know how to interpret that. So
Mhm.
that's a case where I can, read the panel summary and say, yeah, this is what it says on paper, but this is what they really mean
Right.
in terms of your proposal. Now, sometimes, of course, the nitpicking is actually, well, they like it, and um and but they think it needs to be fixed. And
Mhm.
at least in evolution processes, part of our job during the panel is just to encourage the panel to make clear, where they are on that enthusiasm uh,
Mhm.
uh, scale.
Mhm.
So, uh, and some, you know, s- I would say different programs, different program officers, uh, will interact with their panels in different ways. And I'll also say, in terms of, we say contact your program officers, some people are better than others at
Mhm.
getting back
Mhm.
at you,
Yeah.
to you. But that's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
Different programs and different agencies have different cultures.
Right, right. One thing that I found extremely useful, so I've been funded by NIFA, USDA, and NSF, and one thing that I found extremely helpful and also invigorating was actually to serve on a panel. So I really enjoy serving on panels because you get to talk about new science with people, you get to meet people. It's a social, enterprise, but then also you learn a lot, right? And you get to see kind of the way the panel works, the questions that the panel are going to find interesting, which do differ according to agency as well as I think particular panel. Um, One follow up question that I had, and something that I've been wondering, just kind of the course of my career. I am not one of these people that can write 10 good grants a year. Like I'm just not. Right. There are people who can do that, I think. My level of where I come in with grants that I think are exciting and good is one, maybe two per year. Do you have any general advice on the number of submissions that PIs should be making?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and this was especially something that George Gilchrist would emphasize. Grant proposals are not lottery tickets.
Mhm.
Um, Three bad proposals doesn't add up to one good proposal, right? So focus on writing one very good proposal than a bunch of mediocre proposals. Uh, and we saw less of this when we went to no deadline,
Mhm.
um, of people, just throwing multiple proposals at a deadline. So, uh, because keep in mind that when we make funding decisions, one of the criteria that we look at is, are you already funded? Right?
Mm.
We
Yeah.
we have limited dollars,
Mhm.
and so we're going to try to spread the money. And if we've
Yeah.
got two equally good proposals, and one is from somebody who already is well funded, and the other is from somebody who doesn't have funding, we'll go with the person who does not have funding. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. It's made even more complicated by collaboration, right? So you're looking across the entire team, and there may be some people on the team that are well funded, but others who are not. And so it's, there's no simple algorithm here, but that's why if you're already very well funded, of course, you have to be thinking down the road, and
Right.
so you may have stuff which is going to run out, and we're also looking at that, right? So it's not just
Hmm.
how many grants you currently have, but when are they going to expire? So we're looking at that whole big picture
Hmm.
when as we make recommendations.
Right. Yeah. So, kind of, moving back to one of our previous discussions, you mentioned that right now we're dealing with a lot of chaos when it comes to federal funding, and I think in thinking about how many grants you should be writing per year to get funded, uh, something that comes to my mind is our brains really like certainty. Right? Like we like to know that we can look to the future and X Y Z is going to happen, but when times are chaotic, you really can't do that. And so I think this is where your advice to hedge your bets and to be labile with your thinking really, really is great advice, right?
Yeah, and it's even more chaotic now than I mean, there's always a certain amount of stochasticity in the system, but now, yes, well, it it's highly stochastic. It's like, mathematically, chaos is actually deterministic. This is not a deterministic system right now. And it's not even clear like what programs are going to be, what kind of
Right.
funding levels, how they're going to be organized, how
Right.
the programs can be organized. So, um, yeah, a- again, I think the best thing to do would be, again, go back to contacting program officer because the folks at NSF, they're the ones who know sort of what the current state of the landscape is, what might be coming down the pike
I see.
in terms of is this particular program actually still going to be around 6 months from now when you
Right.
think you might be submitting a proposal? And if it's something new, you can't actually talk about it until it's publicly announced, but we can we can give people advice if we think there are some things coming down the pike. That's of course assuming that the program officers actually know what's going to happen.
Right, right. Awesome. Well, that's the end of my questions. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for spending time with us and giving us all of these very clear answers to how to get NSF funding, how to just in general survive in chaotic times. So thank you.
Okay, my pleasure.